Today is the 6th of September, 2014, and this is episode 142. This program is intended for informational and educational purposes only. Cryptocurrency is new, highly experimental, and we're not experts, just obsessed companions walking the road towards a more peer-to-peer future. Welcome to Let's Talk Bitcoin, a twice-weekly show about the ideas, people, and projects building the digital economy and the future of money. My name is Adam B. Levine. Today on Let's Talk Bitcoin, I'm here with Stephanie Murphy.
Hi.
And Boss, a member of the NXT community. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for having me on.
Well, we really appreciate you taking the time. So before you tell us about NXT, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Ex-actor director, who is now a salesman and marketeer, and who stumbled into crypto last year. That's the short rundown.
What's your role within the project? I introduced you as a community member, and I did that intentionally because NXT has one of the least defined leadership hierarchies of really any project that I've seen.
Yeah, that's correct. That's an outgrowth of how we started. It started as a group of people, and it continued to be just a group of people who have a definite anti-authority streak. I would say that my role in the community is mainly like it started. I started out by making summaries of all the information that was available in the Bitcoin thread where we started out, and I've continued to do that. And now I'm connecting people, trying to get initiatives going, not necessarily doing it myself, but being a repository of where to go and who to speak to.
Junction, it sounds like.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
On NXT, give us kind of like a high-level overview of the capabilities of NXT and where it fit in the lexicon. Is it an altcoin? Is it something else?
No, it's not an altcoin. NXT is basically one of the first as they are called, second generation projects. Started out as a coin, still is a coin, but it's meant and designed to be a complete system where you can do payments, where you can make your own projects. We have an asset exchange at this moment. It's a system that's meant for other people to build up on.
So in a world that already has Bitcoin, what does NXT do that's differently, and what does it do that's the same? What are the compelling factors to somebody who has Bitcoin and is learning about NXT? Why would they want to have that instead of the other?
Basically, what NXT does is take the blockchain technology and take it a step further. So a coin can be defined as a coin, or it can be defined as just a token. And when you define it as a token, you can do anything with it. So it is a coin. NXT can be traded on exchanges, but it's also an enabling token that allows you to work with smart contracts, issue assets, which then can be traded as an asset or also as a coin. One of our assets at this moment functions as a coin and is traded on an external exchange. It allows you to do multiple things. We now have set up, for instance, the first decentralized exchange, which functions via the use of our asset exchange. So basically, it takes the technology that everybody already knows and that we know is revolutionary and works, and builds upon that and says, okay, if we can move tokens around, what more could you do with that?
The cool thing about NXT, which I've been kind of following, is that it has so many of these features already working and implemented that there are some like very high profile companies that are talking about how they're going to release the ability to do these things, whereas Next is already doing it.
Yes.
Right? Like the decentralized exchange and being able to issue assets and messaging within it. And I think Next also has this website thing, like almost like a Namecoin replacement type thing. And of course, the distributed exchange that's fully functional. And all these things are out right now, right?
Correct. And several new features will be released end of this week. So end of the week, we will also have decentralized place that will be launched, and the message encrypting will be launched. Up to this moment, messaging, you need to do encrypting yourself, but now it will be built in.
Who is building all this? I know the developers are anonymous, but this seems like a giant amount of work.
Yeah, we are lucky. We have a small core group of developers who started out. People who visit Bitcoin Talk maybe know a few of these people. There's a Belarusian guy who's called Come From Beyond. He started the main coding. We have another person who's also anonymous who basically is the lead developer. So he manages that. But in the last few months, we've also acquired a few new Java developers who are working on separate systems. So we have a voting system, for instance, coming up, and that's being separately developed because that can be done. We have a dedicated person for client development. One of the things that we hear a lot is that the client is really different, and that's probably because we have one person specifically working only on this client. So I think at this moment on separate projects, we have around, 15, 20, 25 developers working, and they all do their own thing. They come together at the lead developer, of course. He says, okay, this is not the time yet, or we need this first. But we have a big team of developers working.
How is that being funded?
Not.
How is that going?
That's actually going quite well. Some of the developers, of course, hold stake. That's clear. We have some developers that hold their own stake, and basically they're making their stake more valuable by introducing more useful features.
Okay, so but let's assume that I'm a developer and I'd like to get involved with NXT.
Yeah.
It sounds like I would need to both work for the project speculatively, hoping that the thing that I develop makes it more valuable, and I would also have to spend my own money in order to buy and acquire stake so that the work that I'm doing actually benefits me as opposed to just being, beneficial to the ecosystem I'm not a part of. So is there any mechanism to deal with people like that, or are you mostly just looking for people who don't need any sort of income? Because this is a primary difference between NXT compared to a project like Mastercoin or certainly Ethereum, things like that. The budget levels are just orders of magnitude different. And yet, as Stephanie mentioned, you have a lot of these features already.
Yeah.
This is one of the reasons I actually got involved and let's say fell in love with the Next community is that it consisted of a lot of people who just did it because they liked to create. A lot of our developers in the first 4 months, so that would be up to March, April, worked for free. Just did it because they liked it. They loved the idea of making this and seeing this happen. And of course, they eventually also got donations from some of our larger stakeholders, but that was not something that they were expecting. It's the same with people in marketing with us. It's the same with people in our infrastructure. All these people just like to create things. We do have a fund for. We know, for instance, we have Next is made is written in Java, and we do know that Java developers are terribly expensive if you need to hire them. They're very expensive developers. We do have a fund for possibly paying people if we need them, but at this moment we still get a lot of people who just want to join the project, and they will get, for useful features, of course, they will get donations, but it's not an expected thing.
So I'd like to address the elephant in the room, I think, which is the large stakeholders. NXT had a initial, it was termed as a fundraiser, but I really think that that's not what it was. I feel like it was a distribution event. So there's a subtle distinction there, because the point is that NXT had kind of an interesting origin story, and a lot of people don't like the fact that it wound up concentrated with the entire money supply distributed at the beginning in the hands of a total of 70 people, with about 50% held by the top 10. So Bitcoin gets around the accusations about being a Ponzi because there's no Ponzi. But NXT actually kind of does look like a Ponzi with 70 guys sharing that role. So, what is your response to that? And why shouldn't this be a really big thing to us?
My first reaction, my personal reaction all the time that I've seen this accusation is For me personally, it is something that I can't do anything about anymore. So I can choose. I can stay in because I trust it or not. But then you get the crucial word trust again. The other thing is a lot of this information over the months already has become outdated. We have a charting feature, and if you look at this, you actually see a very steady distribution happening. I know for a fact, because I know quite a lot of these people now, a lot of this next got distributed as bounties or as payments, or people set up small companies, or just plain selling it off.
Is there a place that people can go to see that?
Yeah.
Is that someplace online?
Yeah, we have on our Bitcoin thread in the first post there is a link called Next Charts, and you can check the division of the complete next distribution. You can see in there. There's also a very specific screen that's called the top wallet account distribution. And actually, you can see there's a very steady downtrend of the top 100. The top 100 at this moment still hold about 700 million. So that would mean that on average, they hold 7 million. I know of two that hold 50 million. Those are two accounts that you can check. But the largest account that at this moment you can see on the blockchain are actually Beta and DGEX, which are the two exchanges.
Hold on, I just want to break in for a moment.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with the initial fundraiser. What was it fundraising for, and who got that?
This is part of the Next mythos. Next was developed by an anonymous person called BC Next, who basically claimed that he was a long-time Bitcoin Talk member, but he never revealed his identity. And he did a fundraiser, let's call it that, of a total of 21 Bitcoin. It was at that moment, Bitcoin was still at $100, so $2,100. And based on the amount of Bitcoin people put in, they were paid out a proportionate amount of Next from that 1 billion. So I think that if you put in 1 Bitcoin, which a few people did, you got 50 million Next. And that's where you started out. Some people did a very small amount of Bitcoin and they got 5,000, I think. The whole list is still on Bitcoin Talk of the initial distribution.
Okay, so the issue is not with BC Next having 21 Bitcoins, woohoo. But the issue is that these people who have now become large stakeholders because the value of Next obviously has increased over time.
Very much. This is one of the things that people also say, and I can imagine that. I think compared to the initial amount you needed to pay, I think they went up by a factor of 5,000.
I think if we're going to be fair, compare it to early investors in Bitcoin. Like, who are the people who mined Bitcoin when they didn't know what it was and it was just not worth anything? I mean, they apparently hold hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin.
Yeah. Well, but there's some relevance here. I am actually going somewhere with this line of questioning.
Okay, yeah, we'll pick it back up. I mean, I just think if you take a risk early on, and then you end up getting rewarded, people always complain later, but they're just complaining because you were right in a sense, right?
Yeah, there's one thing that I look back into the Bitcoin Talk history, and it's also kind of, now we know these IPOs. You see loads of IPOs. Then this started in September 2013. I think it was a fairly new way of doing this, actually. The initial fundraiser was opened for 2 months until it closed. A lot of people also say it was closed early, but 2 months is not early. Definitely not.
Basically, NXT uses a proof of stake type system that primarily is driven by your balance, right? Just like Bitcoin, there is essentially only one reward per block, and so being big really matters quite a bit. I think that there's some validity to the concern because of that, and I know that you're saying that you watch the initial addresses that have these large amounts, but your system is just as anonymous in the same way that Bitcoin is, so there's no real way to tell that this isn't just the same holder sending it to smaller accounts of their own. Can you talk about forging and how it compares to mining? and whether or not this is a fairness issue that I'm correctly perceiving here?
Yeah. Well, it depends on your definition of fair. If you look at the proof of stake, the forging system that we have, basically within the proof of stake system, you need to imagine every coin as a mini miner. It's basically a small unit and it mines. Whether you have one NXT or you have 50 million NXT, and it gives you a proportionate chance of forging. Every coin has the same chance. So if you have a very large stake, you basically have a lot of lottery tickets. So the chance that you will forge in a day or in 2 days or in a week, if you have a larger amount, that will definitely change. In that way, it's not unfair because everybody has the same chance.
That's not unfair, but the issue is that with mining, miners can put a continuous actual effort that costs them. And so it's a competitive process based on resources being expended now as opposed to resources that were expended at one singular event in the past.
Yeah.
So that's I think the difference as far as I see is that there's no guarantee that these stakeholders are actually putting in any value at all. And really, again, it seems like it's in their best interest primarily just not to sell. And there are few enough large holders that they can effectively do that and create an artificially higher price because they control the majority of the market. It's basically the same concern one had about Ripple, except here it's spread over 10 pairs of, hands that all have the same interest.
Yeah.
Compared to there where it's, just that company.
That is an issue that you could bring up. I would have no direct answer to that.
I think you could say the same thing about Bitcoin, honestly, because, right, like if the large initial stakeholders of Bitcoin don't sell, then the price of Bitcoin goes up. And what value are Bitcoin miners contributing? A lot of people make the argument that proof of work is just, kind of burning energy, right? And should you have to prove that you're willing to invest in ASICs and burn energy in order to continue making the blockchain?
I think the point is that they have no monopoly. The early stakeholders in Bitcoin don't have the exclusive first run cheapest source. That's something that people compete for. I think that you're right, but making it so small, I think that anytime you take one of these tokens, the more hands it is in and the more evenly it is spread out, the more effective legitimacy you have. So I agree with you, Stephanie. I think that this is a problem that's shared by other coins, but it seems most concentrated, generally speaking, here, right? I mean, like, I'm sure there are proof of coins out there, but NXT is a player of a coin. It actually is doing stuff. And it does have
proof
this high
of coins?
degree of concentration.
You said, I'm sure there are proof of coins out there. What did you mean by that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sure that there are proof of stake coins out there that have, higher levels of concentration or privately issued tokens out there. But NXT is traded now on a lot of exchanges, and it actually is, is a coin that's talked about quite a bit.
Yeah.
So is that something that you have any concerns about holding back the perceived legitimacy? And also, do you have concerns about forks or anything like that? Because that seems to be the other thing, is that there is something that can be, quote, done about this by people who don't like this, but like the NXT technology.
Yeah, I want to reiterate my personal part is it's done. And this can be a concern, but it is something that without actually completely destroying NXT, we can't do anything about. I know that a few people had the revolutionary idea of freezing these accounts. If there's any way to destroy a system, it's doing that. So that's just not possible. The other part is, like I say, but then again, you get the trust issue of, are they not just moving these coins, is looking at the blockchain, seeing what's happening. I also know that a lot of other coins have tried to make, especially the word fair irritates me, because it's mostly when I hear fair, I hear benefiting me.
Yeah, it's always unfair if it doesn't benefit you, isn't it?
So the word fair I will try to avoid. I don't think it's a good word in this way. I think the word secure is a good way, because that's what it actually is supposed to do. And that's also what your question refers to, I think, Adam. Yes, it is a concern. At this moment, there are several things that we are doing for these kinds of things. I don't know if you already know that we have a thing called account leasing. So this also, even the bigger ones, you can lease out your forging power to another account. Main use of that for most people is pooling, but there is also at this moment a movement within the next community to put a cap on those kinds of things. So basically you force the spreading of this forging power over the different accounts. And that's one of the ways we're thinking of looking if we can't make sure that this majority, basically the possibility to attack the blockchain, can be prevented.
Okay, so you're talking about least forging. Maybe we should just go over this for people who aren't familiar. NXT is 100% proof of stake. So that means that the blocks are authored by people who hold coins instead of people who have computational mining power and are doing proof of work.
Yeah.
That's the issue with like the large stakeholders because they have more power in that situation to author blocks. Now, as far as I know, there's never been a 51% attack tried on a proof of stake currency. Maybe it'll happen at some point in the future, but I'm not aware of one.
It has
to do that. Oh, it has. Tell me about that.
It has happened with, I'm looking at the Navajo coin, Navajo, and that was a proof of stake coin that actually had a double spend attack, and which was successful. That's about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, wow. Okay. So this is a new development.
Yeah.
So I'll have to look into that. But my understanding is that to do a 51% attack on a proof of stake coin, somebody would have to have control of or have to have the forging power or the mining power from 51% of the coins. And the argument against that taking place is that, well, let's say someone tried to buy all the coins to try to get their hands on 51% of the coins. Well, as they buy them, the price is just going to go up and it's going to get gradually more and more expensive. So that kind of discourages against that. And if the distribution is, quote, fair in the beginning, then no one should really be coming close to having 51% of the coins under their own control. Although, you know, that could be an issue too. That's really interesting that there was actually a double spend attack on this Navajo coin.
Yep.
I will definitely have to look at that. But with NXT, you have to have the client open, as I understand it, in order to do forging, which is basically the analogy to mining with NXT. You have to have the client open. So you do have to run it, and, you know, perhaps that costs like a minuscule amount of electricity, or you have to have your computer on. But you can also lease out your forging power to someone else. And there are like these mining pools or these forging pools. But as far as I know, the biggest forging pool for NXT only has like 3% of the coin's forging power. So it's nowhere close to 51%.
No. And because it would be a possibility, of course, that this at some point would happen, we're already thinking of ways to cap that. So it will, I think now the idea is to cap these forging pools at 5% of the total stake. That's 50 million. And
so how would a cap be implemented? I mean, it doesn't sound very like NXT like to put like a central cap on them, or is it just like a voluntary agreement type thing?
Well, this is where the discussion comes in. It's not been implemented. It's not even started coding, but there is a discussion about this possibility, which is there. With this point, you would need to trust all these big people not to do it, and that's something we also don't want. So now in the community and with the developers, there's some people are making calculations and some people are just expressing emotions about how we could manage this. We have one big system that's in development, and leasing is part of this. This is called account control, because we also have a brain wallet, and sometimes people make mistakes with this and things get stolen. So we want to give the user the power to lock things or to cap things, or you can only spend between these hours of the day. And this is part of that whole movement of how can we make it safe and keep the whole network safe in a way that basically would empower the user to do that. But that's a difficult one.
Yeah, and doing that in a trustless way is interesting too.
Yeah.
Is it possible to do something like a lock? Because one of the things that prevents hardware attacks against proof of work systems is that it costs something. Isn't it kind of also a downside? Because you're saying that there's a movement to cap the size of forging pools in order to prevent centralization, because it has all the incentives are basically the same. It makes sense economically to pool your power so that you hit more and your variance is lower. Is that right? Okay. So if that's the case, how is it possible to cap that when everything is based on account numbers, and I could just run a whole bunch of different pools all at the same size, but still effectively control that much power myself. I mean, is there a way to solve that problem?
The discussion now is to cap the forging power. So even if you have 100 million next within an account, it would cap out at 50 million.
So why couldn't I run 20 that have 50 million each?
You could. If it's different accounts, you probably could, yes. That there's no way to check that, and that's a good thing.
But if you did that, if you were running like multiple pools that were just smaller pools, could you tie them together and all have them making a concerted effort to create an alternate blockchain or do a double spend?
I don't know, actually, if that would be possible. In this way, we're talking about 50, 20 pools. We were talking about all the next in play at that moment.
It's not about the specific numbers. Really, again, I'm just saying it seems like so long as the system doesn't tie to specific IP addresses, I mean, and even that wouldn't work very well. It just seems like it would be really hard to prevent any sort of pooling that wants to happen. You know, if the market wants to do this, it seems like the thing that you just said there wouldn't really fix it.
This episode is brought to you by CryptoKit.com and listeners like yourself. Today's magic word is insert. I-N-S-E-R-T. That's insert. You've got until the 10th of September to visit letstalkbitcoin.com and enter the magic words for your share of the listener rewards. And now, back to the show.
So NXT does have, in addition to a whole bunch of different wallets, and now tell me about the wallet situation, because when I was looking back in, I guess, February, there were somewhere between 7 and 11 different options. And the last time I went to nxtclient.org, there weren't that many options. No. So what happened? Was there a reckoning?
Basically, the biggest thing that happened was that one of the contenders for the wallet, which we call the Wesley wallet because the developer is called that, was included within the release version. So when you just use the browser version of the next client, you will get this one, and it's a beautiful client. It's very easy to use. So basically, a lot of the other developers said, "Okay, this is it. We've done enough. We're stopping now. We're not going to develop it anymore because it's already there." And it's
the race was won.
Yeah.
What have those developers who were working on these other things, what have they done? Have they left the community? Have they retargeted their efforts? Or are there more people working on Wesley Wallet now because it was, you know, the winner?
No, Wesley is still working on his own, basically, but he involves the community a lot more. It's basically like now with, for instance, if there's a new feature implemented, he will ask, okay, these are the options. What do you think? But he takes the end decision. I know for a few people started making websites, which like this chart website that I talked about, so you can check the blockchain in an easy way. Some people started developing sites that were very specifically aimed at making it easy to work with the asset exchange, and a few people were asking and have delivered wallets that, for instance, have a wallet, because we have a brain wallet, and that's, for a lot of people, that's a difficult system at the start. You need a very strong password, and before you even know that what a strong password is, a lot can go wrong. So what a few developers have done is basically made a kind of a shell around the normal client, which you can approach via your browser. No information about your normal passphrase is sent to that site, but you can do all the things that you could do in the open client, let's call it that. I know the DGEX exchange has his own client. Also, I think it even has two-factor authentication, but it at least has a wallet system. So it's mostly about security, where if people are working on different wallets, it's about extra security and ease of use.
One of my favorite things about NXT is that it takes a lot of these concepts like user-created assets And instead of piggybacking on a blockchain that doesn't really want it there, you guys have rolled your own. And so you're able to build in really kind of whatever features you want. Talk to us about the asset exchange. How is it being used right now? What are its advantages compared to some of these other ones that ride on Bitcoin's blockchain? Because it's been kind of difficult using some of the solutions that are out there.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you say is we have our own blockchain, so we can do whatever we want, and if we want to change it or it needs to be changed, especially because we're young, we can still change it very easily. Also, the speed of the system helps. We have 1 block per minute on average, so transactions are really quick. We don't depend on another blockchain. That certainly helps, so we don't have to be afraid that things will get changed in the other blockchain, which would mean that we would have trouble keeping our services alive. Asset exchange itself is very busy at the moment. I think it's a real pity that it isn't the amount of volume that's going around in there, that's not really visible, because there's a lot of volume being pumped around in there. What I find funny is that the asset exchange is still used as an exchange. The nice thing about it is the name asset exchange was actually made by someone who isn't a native speaker. He used exchange, but in the most basic sense, as in exchanging tokens. And everybody, because we're programmed that way, thought, oh, this is an exchange like we know it, like the crypto exchanges. And people tend to focus on that. So we have a lot of people who are using it for funding their businesses, startups.
So when you say a token exchange, you mean tokens that are built on top of NXT in the same way that in Counterparty, those tokens are built on top of Bitcoin?
Yeah. For 1,000 NXT, you can release any amount of tokens that you want and trade them, and assign them value, and then start trading them or selling them. And you can even pay out dividends with the system, automatic. Someone made an automatic dividend system, but we're also going to put it in the core now. So
tell me about that. What does that mean? That means that you can have an address that controls an asset, and when that address receives funds, it automatically distributes it as a dividend?
Yeah, exactly. That's the idea, that you put in parameters for when it should pay out and when definitely not. And then at a set point in time, it could pay out dividends.
Interesting. So this is a feature that's being built outside of, you said, the core. So what does that mean? Is this something that somebody else has done and it's going to be strapped on, or how does it work right now?
Someone already has this service. It's working. So you basically can ask him to do this for you, but there are also plans, I already know, that they're to build it into the core. So it becomes a feature of Next, because it would work very well with the asset exchange itself. So it's a natural extension of.
With issuing tokens or creating tokens on Next, there's a cost to that, right? Doesn't it cost like 1,000 Next or something?
1,000 Next, yes.
Okay, so Adam, what is the cost on Counterparty to create an asset?
It's 0.5x CP. I really have no idea what those things convert to, though. I think the 0.5x CP is maybe $1 or $2.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And 1,000 Next would be, maybe it's about the same as that?
No, it's more. It's about $50, $46 at this moment.
And it's interesting because we're seeing more of these markets come out. I was just looking at the BitShares one, and I think it's like 266,000 BitShares to create an asset there. So the prices are all over the place.
Yeah. Well, the idea behind prices is very simple. It's a spam control. That's basically what it is. That's how we describe it. That's how we talk about it. The nice thing, of course, is if you hit a block where someone creates an asset, because you get the fees, of course, and you have a very nice block to have forged. It's not there to earn more money. It's there as a spam control. It's nothing more or less.
I mean, how many assets are created on the Next platform right now?
At this moment, let me check, because it's a lot. 197 on there right now, and I think that about a third of those are actively traded. People went a bit mad.
Wow.
People went a bit mad when the asset exchange was first created, of course. So a lot of people just threw in 1,000 Next and made some. But a lot of these aren't traded and basically aren't real.
Adam, do you know any stats on Counterparty?
Counterparty has like 1,200 or 1,400 right now. But again, a lot of that is just placeholder stuff. Now, this is another differentiator between these two types of systems, is that, and I believe Mastercoin does basically the same thing as NXT. But NXT, allows you to have multiple assets issued by different people under the same name.
Yeah.
So talk about that for a second. Why is that a good decision?
There was a long discussion about that, a very long one, but eventually the outcome was if we don't do it, people will start squatting the names. So the unique identifier of an asset is the asset ID. This is a number on the system. If you want to look for the culture that has emerged now, if you issue an asset, you make posts or you create a site or whatever, you put the asset on asset ID on there, you put the issuing account on there, and those are the two identifiers that people will need. If we had done it another way, the fear was, and I think it would really have happened knowing what people are like, is that someone would immediately have squatted the names that they knew were already coming up. We have a thing that was in development when the asset exchange was already basically still a concept, was the multi-gateway, which is our decentralized exchange, and people would have squatted that. We were certain of that. So that's why we said, okay, we're allowing anyone to create that name, but the asset, the ID, will be unique. And that's just a numeric string.
The ability to issue the same asset from different names.
Yeah.
I don't really understand that.
Well, so I think that I can summarize here real quick.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what I hear you saying is that and I think that we've actually seen this in other places too. Again, I've been watching BitShares for the last couple of days, and they have two types of systems. They have their asset registration system, which, like I said, has that kind of crazy high price, and so they have very few assets that are issued. But they have a name system, non-transferable name system, that are essentially account names, and those were squatted immediately because they had a very, very small cost, and people didn't understand that they were non-transferable. Yeah. So what that means is that if somebody, who would like to have the name that was now squatted has absolutely nothing that they can do about it, and it's a pseudonymous system, so it's actually quite hard to track down the actual person, even if it was transferable. Yeah. So by doing what NXT does, and again, Mastercoin uses this solution too, essentially you attach reputation to everything because nothing can be trusted just by its name. Mm-hmm. So therefore, you have to check this secondary thing, as opposed to it having the illusion of being legitimate just based on the name, but in fact, it could be squatted and owned by somebody malicious.
Yeah.
So it's like two-factor asset names, kind of.
Yeah, it's okay. Like some people would squat the name Google, for instance, if they had those kinds of things, and if actually, if we had the first system where the name would be unique, the name Google, it would be gone within a few minutes, definitely. Now you can have 1,000 Googles, but you can also know which one is the real one by checking the asset ID, and there's this is the one I need, and the other ones I'm doing nothing with. One thing that's in development, there will be an inbuilt reputation system, so that will make it even easier. So you know which is a legitimate trader and which one is trying to scam you. It was a very long discussion before we got there.
Okay, that's really cool. Okay, so it seems like every feature you can think of next already has it up and running. It's so cool.
To the features already being there. We just made a comparison chart to all the other second-gen systems that are out there and Bitcoin, because you need to include Bitcoin on these kinds of things. And it's rather amazing to see that our list at this moment of available now, as it's called, in green, is as long as not available but in development for a lot of these others. Some of those, like Mastercoin or a counterparty, don't have certain things, but BitShares is one that is developing in the same space as we do, but it's still in development. I mainly work within NXT, so it's normal for me, but it's sometimes amazing when you tell people and say, oh, do you already have it? Yes, for months already. Didn't you know?
Yeah, it's really just an issue of it hasn't been promoted as much, you know, if it was a centralized company, perhaps they might have a marketing person and they'd be pimping all this stuff individually, but it's just out there and it's kind of up to the community to promote it. And there's a lot to promote. It maybe isn't happening in most organized fashion, which might be okay. But
it is a difficult thing. It's the same like how we started this interview by saying, who are you within the community? And that is a difficult one within our community, because if you say I'm the press officer of Next, boom, you have a fight on your hands because you are not the press officer. Actually, I'm not. There is a very clear energy against any authority in there. Sometimes it's irritating, but it also makes it easy to do things because you can just jump in and say, okay, yeah, you're doing this, but I'm going to try too. And nobody will stop you. Actually, most people will applaud you.
I'm wondering about the applications of, quote, smart contracts, right? That's kind of a buzzword, but, it's contracts that can execute themselves. Does Next have any kind of multi-signature capability as the most basic form of sort of something like that? Or can it do anything else with so-called smart contracts?
Smart contracts is one of the things that we're lagging behind on at this moment. It is in development. It is in the same area as the account control, because you could also do multi-sig in accounts, of course. But it's something that has been very difficult. We had one system in development. It's still in development. But how much of these scripting things you put into the core is a very big discussion. It's one of the things that Ethereum also has been criticized for, is how complex does it get? This is a discussion that's not been closed yet. People are developing it, but how much you actually want to do inside and how much you want to do on top, that's not been decided yet. I know 2 groups are working on it, but there's no ETA on that yet.
I know BC Next disappeared a couple months ago and said that their next project was going to be under their real name. Yeah. Do you have any just wild speculation about what the next project might be? Not the NXT project, but the following project.
No, I really have no clue. And it's part of the mythos of the whole Next thing. It's something that we don't know who he was. There are speculations that he was this person in the community. Some people make the wild accusation that he was Satoshi. We don't know. At some point he said, okay, this is basically just a test case for my real revolutionary coin. So no idea. And I would say to everybody, keep your eyes out, because if it comes out, it will be very big. But I don't know. And nobody does. But it is this kind of mythology that there's a kind of a story about it, and that makes it nice. People like stories, and I think that persons like BC Next have understood that part, that it's also nice to not know everyone. It's not even interesting who he was, basically, because the technology is much more interesting. But people have this need to make up stories if they don't know it. They fill in the gaps.
Bas, we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. We have a couple of questions to wrap things up. This one comes from listener Ivan. Basically, he'd like a kind of overview of how you look at the other projects in the space, specifically Ethereum, BitShares, Counterparty, and Mastercoin. Yeah. Quote, they're all Generation 2 platforms with plans for delivering features that Bitcoin either can't or won't in the short term. What area is NXT most likely to succeed? Where do you think that you'll have the largest challenge?
As in comparison to the other ones, I personally am looking very forward to BitShares. For me, that looks like a really interesting project, also because they're grappling with the same questions that we are doing. And I looked at the forum and I see that they're also really thinking about, okay, but what does it mean? What will this mean within 10 years? That's interesting if communities do that. Counterparty, Mastercoin, for all these systems that piggyback on the blockchain, basically, I have difficulty grasping that. With Counterparty, we saw when Bitcoin changed their transaction system that they really had a problem. I think that is a big difficulty that they will keep having, because Bitcoin has no reason to support them, no intrinsic reason. For ourselves, I think the multiple implementations of the asset exchange, especially once people catch on to the fact that it's a token exchange, will be one of the biggest things. One of the things that we've now at this moment this week have been doing, and it's live now, is basically using the asset exchange to have a completely decentralized exchange. So you can exchange Bitcoin against Next, against Darkcoin, against Litecoin without any centralized exchange in between. It is possible by using multi-signature and the asset exchange. I think these kind of innovative things and uses of looking at the asset exchange as just a system of moving tokens will be very interesting. Also, what one of the persons, for instance, did is one of the asset has changed into a coin. It's now being traded on an external exchange, and it is behaving like a coin. And we're going to develop that into a side chain project, so you can actually create even proof of work coins on top of Next. We're very excited about that. One of the biggest issues that we have, and this will be one that will keep biting us for a long time, I think, is basically the way how we will resolve our decentralization. My personal view of this is that decentralization in the technical part doesn't necessarily mean that you need to do the whole organization decentralized. That's a philosophical question almost. But exposure, getting the message out, that people know that we have these things, is definitely one of the biggest hurdles we will have to tackle in the coming months. We already had need to tackle them, but we didn't. So there's a lot of work to do there, and I hope we will succeed in that.
Playing off of NXT's incredibly decentralized nature, you've mentioned a bunch of projects here. Out of all of the projects that you're aware of going on in the NXT ecosystem, can you talk about one or two examples that you think are really cool and that people don't know about?
The first one would be the multi-gateway that we've just built. That is, for me, one of the most exciting things. The multi-gateway is a multiple server project which uses multi-sig, where you basically can register an account. You can put in any coin that is supported by the system at this moment, for instance, Coin or Litecoin. You can put them in at one end. They will be converted into tokens on the asset exchange, which can be traded in any way. And you can directly trade one coin against the other. At this moment, I think we have 20 coins that are going to be supported directly. We're working on this. But any coin can basically say, we want to be on it. We're open about that. There are no fees. And it's decentralized. It's one of the holy grails of the crypto community. We have these exchanges that are basically centralized, which are a point of failure a lot. Not all of them, of course. Most of them are trustworthy, but we've seen what happens when it breaks down. And that's terrible. Prices drop. People lose trust. And this is now a system that is capable of doing it in a nearly trustless way. It's not completely trustless yet, but much more than a single server exchange would be. And that's the initiative that I would really like to ask people to have a look at. multigateway.com.
Then, since you only gave me one, let me pick on you for one more. What's a fun one, right? Are there any projects out there that don't necessarily fall under absolutely vital utility and are just like somebody decided to do that thing and it's also really neat and people should know about?
Well, it's a project that I'm working on myself, which is a crypto MMO. It's basically a multiplayer game where you can earn money in game. This is what we start working on. This came from the whole idea, how do we make proof of stake fun? Like mining is fun. Mining is also this idea, I'm making money with sitting on my ass. And we wanted to make doing transactions fun, and a game would be the best way to do it. And of course, gambling is being developed. That's also a big one. So those are the ones that spring to mind for me.
So, Bass, your background is as a actor-director. Now you're here talking with us about this second-generation crypto platform. For other people who would like to get involved, what types of people are, invited to the NXT party? What types of skills do you need? And where should they go to get involved?
Writing skills are always needed. This is one of the things that we're really looking for. People who can get involved with the more creative side, which you would not immediately associate with crypto. It's people who write, people who can do marketing, can do advertising. This plugs in with the idea that we lag behind on that. Also, Java developers, big one. If people want to help out and want to maybe even become part of core team, they're very welcome to come. The easiest way would be to contact us on the forums. That's the easiest way. That's nextforum.org. And they can contact me, Damelon. I'm an admin there. And one of our key developers, Wesley, is also an admin there. So if specific developers questions, they could go to him. I think those two would be the best.
So if you're successful with what you want to do and, the NXT community is successful, where are you going to be in 10 years? What's the world look like?
This is such a difficult one, but I think that normal consumers will never, ever touch our wallet. That's just not how it works. It would be great if some of these things would really become active on the background and basically provide the infrastructure for things that we take for granted on the top, like the normal retailing business, that they're just using the tokens for the transactions that they make. We feel a lot of movement from banks and from financial institutions already that are interested in using it for startups. Would be great if capital would be much easier to gain for startups. Also, one of the things that I really hope is the whole remittance market, that crypto will be much, that we break down that. That's more an idealistic thing, but I would really hope that we could make it easy for people who have no access to funds or funding at this moment to get them that.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Let's Talk Bitcoin. Content for today's episode was provided by Stephanie, Boss, and Adam. This episode was edited by Denise Levine and Adam Levine. Music was provided by Jared Rubens and General Fuzz. See you next time.